All right, let's pray. What? Oh, kids have to go. You really blew it, fellas. To be fair, it's not on here, so someone blew it. No names. If I don't know, if you're the age you're supposed to leave, just go. Third, fourth, and fifth. If you're in third, fourth, and fifth grade, you can leave now. All right, now we'll pray. All right. Dear God, thank you for this day. Thank you that we could gather, Lord, to consider how you speak to us. And may you speak to us this morning in your name. Amen. Let me open from Matthew 6. Matthew 6, 22 to 23. The eye is the lamp of the body, so if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? We're in the middle of this series called Tuning In, in which we're considering how God uses our five senses to communicate to us. The central idea is that each one of us is created with a dual nature that's intended to be completely united. We're not dualists where we say, we have a spirit and we have a body, and our spirit is more important than our body. We're not monists that flatten those two together and say we're just one nature. We do believe we have two natures. We're a spirit and we're body. And those two things are intended to be eternally united. We are the only thing in all of creation that's united to God by His Spirit, and yet also united to creation by the fact that we have our feet in the dust. Too often we think of those things as being in contrast with each other, but we want to be set free from that because that's not a biblical idea. Those two things are not in contrast. Jesus would not have come as a human child if our spirit was all that mattered. Our body matters. Jesus would not have had to have his flesh crucified if our bodies didn't matter. He would not have had to resurrect his human fleshly body if it didn't matter. And he couldn't promise us the same thing if it didn't matter. His life, death, and resurrection was a salvation that consisted of both our spirit and our flesh. And, as I've had the pleasure of reading the Advent devotionals that a lot of you have written before they go live in the season of Advent. And what has resonated with me as I've read those devotionals, and as I've been preparing for the series, is how much the birth of Jesus underscores how important our bodies actually are. Jesus, the Son of God, coming in human flesh, we call that event the Incarnation. Have you ever considered what the word incarnation actually means? I was reading another book this week, and this idea came up. The incarnation, it basically comes from the Latin, incarnis. Incarnis, so he's in going into carnus, or the word we would use is carnal. He's becoming carnal. Now, typically, we don't use that word carnal very often, but when we do, we typically use it in a negative way. It has a negative connotation. We mean to say, if something is carnal, that it belongs to kind of our basest instincts, our basest flesh. Oftentimes, it's used to refer to sexual desires. In the KJV version of the Bible, which most of us don't read, but the word carnal is used 14 times, and it's always used negatively. For you to be carnal is for you to stand against what God is doing. But again, consider the word incarnation. Jesus becomes incarnal. He becomes carnal. John says the Word becomes flesh. The Word becomes carnal. Even those instances in Scripture where Paul contrasts the flesh to the Spirit, he cannot mean that being in the flesh is actually sinful. He's saying that our sinful desires often come from what's around us in the temporal and our flesh. But to be in the flesh has actually been redeemed by Christ. So our flesh is being redeemed. And we discover that this is what Jesus redeems through the incarnation. It's what we celebrate at Christmas. He's taken on flesh just like you and I. Jesus experiences relationship to God through his five senses, the way that we do. Jesus, as the author of Hebrews says, Jesus can empathize with us because he's been where we are. Jesus experiences life through his physical senses, like when his friend Lazarus dies. Jesus feels that. He can relate to who we are. So what I'm saying is that our physical senses are restored, and they allow us to understand God, ourselves, and others. Our physical senses become God's messengers to us. So we considered last week the exhortation that he who has ears to hear, let him hear. Hearing, I said, can be our most dangerous sense because we can do it passively. You can't shut it off, really, even if you stick your fingers in your ears. And so we hear without trying. And so we have to move from passive listening to active listening. Well, today, we're going to consider how God speaks to us through our physical sense of sight and what we can learn about God, ourselves, and others. Jesus claims that the eye is the lamp of the body. The lamp of the body is what Jesus says. The statement's way more loaded with meaning than we typically take time to consider, because we typically just jump to whatever spiritual significance it has, and we don't think about what Jesus is actually saying and what he's referencing from a physical perspective. But I want to consider the physical sensation of seeing. What are you doing when you're seeing? What your eyes do, and this is going to be somewhat simplistic, but I think it's helpful. From a purely physical perspective, what your eye does is literally just take in light. Your eyes just take in light. Everything you see, every physical object, every color in the sky, you only perceive it the way that you do because of the way that light reflects off that surface. Or a better word is refracts off that surface. The way the light changes once it hits that surface. When light hits an object, it comes off. There's a combination of the light being absorbed, some light being reflected, and then the angle of the light actually changing. And all of this creates color and distinguishes one part of a thing from another. So when you see a sunrise or a sunset, for example, the only reason that you see the colors the way that you do is because the rays of the sun are actually bending over the surface of the earth. So the way that the sun is away from us, the light bends through the atmosphere over the surface of the earth, and you see it as a beautiful sunset of red, orange, purple, whatever. It's why when you look at a rainbow, you see different bends of light, and each of them are different colors because the light is bending differently, it's refracting differently. It's the reason why golden hour exists for photographers. When there's this hour of the day where everybody looks good all of a sudden because of like the nice warm glow of the sun. It's why that same concept is why a leaf looks green. Why when you look at something, it appears green to you, or red, or blue. Every color is just a difference in the way that light reflects off that or refracts off that object. The second thing that makes vision possible is the difference between brightness and darkness, or light and shadow. So the more light things are, certain colors look more or less vibrant at certain times of the day when we're receiving more or less of the sun's light. And then the way that the light hits an object and actually creates shadows and creates dimension is the reason that you can distinguish somebody's face, for example, when you look at them, because of the way that the light creates dimension on a person's face, so you can make out the physical features that they have. All of this is why, by the way, when you purchase a new TV, if you pay any attention at all, the two numbers that they focus on are saturation, which is the intensity of the color that you see, and the contrast point, which is the difference between the brightest white and the darkest black. Because those are the two things that make your vision kind of really special. That's what your eyes are doing. Every time you open your eyes, they're distinguishing light, how it's refracting off objects, and the difference between the light and the darkness. The people listening to Jesus had no idea how their eyeballs worked. They just knew that they could see or not see. And so this is why I think that Jesus says the eye is the lamp of the body. Because if you imagine that you're just living in this container, and you can actually kind of practice this, if you're just living in this container of your body and you close your eyes, you experience complete blackness in this container. But then if you imagine that your eyes are like a window and you open your eyes, doesn't it feel like the light literally floods inside your entire body? That your eyes really become the lamp that lights up the darkness of your body. And so Jesus is using this metaphor to get them to really think about what happens when you're seeing, what happens when you're looking. The fact that we can know what we're doing when we're physically seeing, I think, helps us to understand more about what Jesus is saying, what it means to accept light into your body or to accept darkness into your body. Jesus is the light of the world. He's bouncing off all of the objects around us in some form. He is reflecting off some, refracting off others, demonstrating where the light is and where the darkness is. Jesus is the light. And so I want us to get us to see that even in Jesus' statement here, though, he's not separating our physical experience of seeing from our spiritual experience of seeing. In fact, the two are very closely related because it comes in the midst of a teaching from the Sermon on the Mount. This is the context of this statement that the eye is the lamp of the body. Look what he's talking about in Matthew 6:19. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? No one can serve two masters. For either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. So in the midst of this conversation, this teaching that Jesus has on literally looking at the temporal around us, the physical things, money, stuff that's going to rust, stuff that's going to destroy, He says you need to be looking for something else. You need to not be staring at this physical stuff. You need to not be staring at money or the things that money can buy. So this physical sensation of what you're looking at, set your actual eyes on the things that are worth investing in. Look with your eyes to see where heaven is all around you. Look with your eyes to see where real treasure lies. He doesn't separate our physical act from our spiritual one. He's saying the biggest problem is that you focus on what your physical eyes can see, rather than letting God communicate to you through that very thing. And that warning to us is of greater danger in the 21st century than it's been at any other time in human history, because today you can open your eyes and you can see whatever you want, whenever you want, and perhaps especially things that you shouldn't be seeing, because our eyes are very easily deceived. Have you ever heard the expression, do my eyes deceive me? Or another one, why do we rely on eyewitness accounts? Well, the reason that we are shocked if we think that our eyes deceive us, the reason we rely on eyewitness accounts, is because we believe that while our other senses could trick us, our eyes will always tell the truth. My eyes will never lie to me. I know what I saw. This is why the shift from audio-based broadcasting to video-based broadcasting was supposed to be rise up to this new level of journalistic integrity. Because there was a period in the 1930s, actually, it was Orson Welles read War of the Worlds live on the radio, and he read it as if it was a news broadcast. The War of the Worlds, of course, is about an alien invasion, and the people listening to the radio didn't know it was fake. And it actually caused like a huge panic and chaos because people thought the aliens were literally invading as they listened to it on the radio. So with video-based broadcasting, they thought, finally, that'll never happen again. I know what I see. I can trust what I see. Well, welcome to the world of AI, where you don't know what you saw, and you can't trust what you see. Have you ever experienced in your life that someone, and I'm not going to pick on certain age groups, but someone sends you a video that was AI generated, but they believed it was real? You can download apps on your phone right now, put in some prompts, and within a few minutes, you can have Bob Ross painting you a picture of an eyeball, reading you the verse we're looking at, and ending with, and that's the message of the gospel. And I know that because I did it.
Jesus says the eye is the lamp of the body. If your eye is healthy, you will be full of light and avoid any little happy accidents along the way. And that's the message of the gospel. Jesus says the eye is the lamp of the body.
But you don't need AI, right? There's advertisers, influencers. Everybody's deceiving us with our eyeballs. The advertising one that gets me all the time is the truck commercials. It's always the least details, right? They'll show you the truck that's like, it's the one you want. It's like fully loaded. It's got everything, driving like directly over mountains, towing semi-trailers. And then they're like, great lease deal, $239 a month. And you're like, wow, all that for $239 a month? And then you read the fine print, and it's like, no, not that one. You know, long before influencers or advertisers, there were infomercials. You know, have you ever seen the Flex Seal infomercial? You can make a boat using Flex Seal. I do not recommend you do that. Our eyes are now consumed by light that's being artificially generated on our phones, sending us artificial images, all intended to stir in us a desire for what we're looking at. Whether it's an influencer using AI to enhance their appearance, an ad agency using visual imagery to create buy-in, a pitch man making us think we're seeing something that's not really possible, it's artificial light being generated to give us artificial images because they know that the eyes are the gateway to the body. If I can convince you with your eyes, your body will surely follow. Our eyes are the gateway, and we will either be seeking truth with our eyes or we'll be seeking deception. And we're more prone to deception today than ever. So how do we get that under control? Three things. We need to see ourselves, we need to see God, we need to see ourselves, and we need to see others. So first, seeing God. The point that Jesus is making about what we see and are looking at is connected to the things we desire is actually a connection that's made all throughout the Bible. The things that you look at is what you desire. God places a high value on his image. All throughout the Old Testament, it's his image that he protects. And the reason he places such high value on it, in part, is because he's designed humanity as his image. Genesis 1:27, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. There's more to this idea about being made in God's image that we can get into. Is that verse up there, Mario? Maybe I forgot to put that slide in. But there's a sense in which God is saying to create humanity, in the very creation, if you want to understand who God is, if you want to get a glimpse of God, look no further than the mirror, look no further than your neighbor. And he uses this threefold pattern that we're talking about. If we want to see, we want to look at God, our senses communicate something to us about ourselves and something about others. So the first line, God creates a man in his own image. You can see God when you look at man. Then it says, in the image of God, he created him. In other words, a singularity, a single being. And then he says, he created them. In other words, he created others, all of us in the image of God. The point is, from the beginning, we discover God's interest in his image and how he will communicate to us who he is, who we are, and who others are around us. It's so important that he prohibits the people of Israel from making any images in the Ten Commandments, Exodus 20, verse 4. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that's in heaven above, or that's in the earth beneath, or that's in the water under the earth. The prohibition is because he already has an image that he's created, and because God understands that you will begin to worship what you're looking at. You will worship the created physical thing that's instead of God, instead of drawing it to God, which is precisely what happens when the people make the golden calf. But it's their story, the Israel story throughout all of the Old Testament, constantly turning to different images, constantly turning to the gods of Canaan. You could maybe make the claim that the image of God is, if not the central issue in the Old Testament, it certainly is one of the central issues. It's certainly a central theme, and it becomes even more obvious because then God, in order to save his people, comes in human form. And we read in Colossians what Paul says, that Jesus is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. God is so concerned with his image that he sends his son in the incarnation. The carnal one we call Jesus. But are we looking at God? Are we seeing God? Because we're so distracted. So many things pull our attention towards them. So many things that attract the eye. Which is why we need to understand ourselves. We need to see ourselves. The story of Genesis, God creates the humans. He places them in a garden. Says, go and make the rest of creation look like this. While you're at it, feel free to eat whatever you want, except this one tree, don't eat from that one. If you eat it, you'll know good and evil. There's so much going on here about how Adam and Eve were already like God, but the temptation is that they will become like God when they already were like God. But they eat from the tree, and we usually say, well, the serpent made them do it. That's not true. Here's what happens, Genesis 3, 6 to 7. Listen to the impetus for her eating the fruit. So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate, and she also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both were opened, and they knew that they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loincloths. Eve sees that the tree is good for food. It delights her eyes. This is how the deception takes hold. It's what she's looking at. The lamp to the body deceived her. God, Eve thought, wasn't looking out for their good. He was just trying to protect his position of power. But it isn't until Eve really looks at the fruit, really sees it, that it delights her. And she eats it. And then their eyes were opened. Here's what happens as a result of sin. Sin makes evil look good and good look evil. Sin makes evil look good and good look evil. It's right there in Genesis. God has forbidden only one thing that he said, when you eat of that one, you're going to have consequences for your disobedience. But Eve looks at it and says, that looks pretty good to me. And then as soon as they eat the fruit, what used to look real good looks shameful. You know, when Adam sees Eve for the first time, he's like, amazing. And now he says, I need you to cover up. In Romans 1, Paul says something similar about all of humanity. He says that sin has caused our vision to shift, so that instead of seeing God in all of creation, we just look to creation. We exchange the glory of God for deception and lies. Our eyes are conditioned to twist what is bad into what is good, and what is good into what is bad. In our day and age, when we have so much visual media in front of us, it's almost impossible to avoid. You can watch a television or a show and that you think is going to be completely wholesome, and then all of a sudden there's an aspect of it that you didn't really want in your brain, but you justify it, the TV show you're watching, the movie, you justify it because, well, it's just one small part of the whole. Or you sit down next to your kids and watch HGTV, and next thing you're watching Beachfront Bargain Hunt, and then there's a razor blade commercial or an underwear commercial. And you go, that's not why I turned this on. You scroll through your feed on social media, and all of a sudden the algorithm kicks you something you didn't want to see. Your eyes linger a little longer than it should. I'm not arguing that we should just cease and desist with every form of visual media. I think we need to be very careful, though, and we need to be very aware. We need to be actively engaged with the images that are coming into our head. Because if we aren't, then little by little, our minds will begin to be convinced that the bad things are good and the good things are bad. That's how we're wired. What we look at tells us who we are and what we're thinking about. But we also need to see others. We need to see God, we need to see ourselves, and we need to see others. We need to see others how God sees them. Do we train ourselves to really see others around us? Do we physically see them the way they're designed and created, or when we see them, do we see the image of God in them? Not just looking at them to see what they look like, but looking at them to see who they are. Looking at them to hear their story. Do we train ourselves to see them not just how the light refracts off of them, not just the way that they create a visible shape, but how Jesus, the light of the world, refracts off of them? When we look at a person, do we really see them? Do we see them as just an object in front of us, or do we see them as a person that God has created? Do you look into people's eyes when you talk to them? I say this to all my basketball teams. First and second graders I've coached all the way up to high schoolers, 18-year-old men. And I tell them all the time, when they're not, I say, how do you listen to me? And their first response is always, not the 18-year-olds anymore, because they've heard me say it too many times. But they always go, with my ears. And I go, no, you listen to me with your eyes. I know you're listening to me when you're looking at me. And if you're not looking at me, then I don't know you're listening. You could be looking at your girlfriend in the stands. You could be looking at your mom. You could be looking somewhere else, but you're not listening to me. You need to look at me. You listen with your eyes, which is something a coach told me when I was like 15, and it's stuck with me ever since. I don't care if you're 18 or 19 or whatever. Do you listen to people with your eyes? When you turn lamp to lamp, do you let your light shine into them and their light shine into you? When you see a waiter or waitress come up to you at a restaurant, do you look at them in the eyes as a person who's come to help you and serve you, or do you just take your menu, look at it, dismiss them? That makes a big difference in somebody's life. Someone you don't know, you stop and you look them in the eyes. The grocery store clerk. When you decide I'm not going to do self-checkout today and you go through the aisle, do you look at the person in the eyes, communicate with them that I see you? Not just I see a person standing there with a job, but I see you. When you go to the gas station, do you just hand because it's easy to just hold your card out the window, fill it regular, fill it super, whatever, but do you stop and look at them? Thank you for this job, lamp to lamp. I want to show you a brief video that highlights the power of looking someone in the eyes. It's from a short film documentary called The Barber of Little Rock, and basically The Barber of Little Rock tells the story of this man living in Little Rock who who basically went back, became somewhat successful and went back into this community to train young men to have a career, to be able to sustain themselves. He's established banks where they can do community loans and literally give somebody a loan based on their character and who they are, because a lot of people in the cities that he's working in the area that he's working in, they don't have credit. You're not going to get money from a traditional bank. You might not even have a trackable, system of pay. You might get paid in cash. You might keep it. You might not have bank accounts, but he's able to help people get out of jams by giving them community loans based on their character because he sees them. Anyway, he teaches these young men from poverty, difficult backgrounds, challenging situations, and he wants them to know that they're valuable, that they have worth, and he invests in them. But there's this exercise that they're worthy to have careers. They're worthy to have money. They're worthy to be loved. And there's an exercise that he does with these young men that I want you to see.
I want you and I want you to stand up for a second. I'm going to show you something right now that we don't hardly ever do, but I want you to, for 2 minutes, I want you to look at him in his eyes. And I want you to be with him. And I want you to be with him for 2 minutes. All right, come close, right here. Now, don't look off. When you look in those eyes, think about your kids. Think about your loved ones. Think about the setbacks and the wins, all the hard lessons, and just see all the hurt, see all the pain. Be with him right now. Time. It's all right, it's all right. It's all right. It's all right. It's all right.
I seen my big brother, man. I ain't seen him since I was 12 years old.
I say a lot, tell a whole story, you know, and that was uncomfortable for them. I know it was, because I've done it before. But that's an exercise that will help you if you're somebody that's introverted, you're somebody that's kind of in a shell, and help you be more assertive and help you to be more, you know, and understanding to what other people are going through.
The young man, after he got done, he said, "What'd you see?" And he goes, what he said, I don't know if you could hear him, he said, "I saw my older brother, who I haven't seen since I was 12. He's carrying around this deep pain inside of him of the loss of his older brother, where his older brother left, died, we don't know. Could be incarcerated. But he's going, I haven't seen him, and when you stopped to look at me, I felt like my older brother was looking at me again." When you look at people, this is, I mean, that's the goal. You look at them and you say, I'm looking at you in your eyes, and I don't want you to see me. I want you to see your older brother looking at you. Your older brother, Jesus, looking at you, seeing you. Where we started, the eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? Are you using the lamp of your body to fill your body with light? Or is it filling your body with darkness? Are you looking for God in the things around you? Are you being deceived? Are you examining who you are? What does my eye tell me about the things that I desire? What does my eyes tell me about the things that I want? What does my eye tell me about the things maybe that I'm worshiping? And then when you look at others, do you see them? Do you take them in? And do you use your eyes as a lamp to them? To actually share with them the light that's in your body. Because if your body is full of darkness, there's nothing coming out of your eyes. But if your body's full of light, then light will come out of your eyes as you see and speak to others. God has called us to truly see. Now we can see the image of God in Jesus, in ourselves, and in others. Now we can see God. And that's the message of the gospel. Father, thank you for this day, Lord, that we could gather, that we could see. I pray that we would see. Lord, we would understand more about this physical sense of vision that you've given us that would help us see you in the person of Jesus and ourselves and our neighbor. That we would discover, Lord, the light in the darkness, that our eyes would be the lamp that would illuminate the entirety of our beings, that we would become agents of the light. Be with us, Lord, in your name. Amen.